Also playing saxophone, Sean Kang. And holding down the low end, and quite a fine addition to the band, Lila Ramirez. I'm sad to see some of these cats move on. It's been a pleasure working with them. Kai is actually going to be moving on to USC next year. And they're going to have to fight it out because Lila's going to be a Bruin over at UCLA. In the trombone section, we got Michael Perkins. And Jerry Gray. And Arden Wu. And Julie Amezcua. We have a small but mighty trumpet section, as I'm sure you've been hearing. We kind of have two lead trumpet players, actually. They're both incredible. That's Bruce Flores. And Edwin Rohel. And another member I've loved having in the band for a few semesters, and he's actually going to be leaving us as well, going up north to Cal Poly Humboldt. That's right? Yeah, Cal Poly Humboldt. That's Steven Samaniego. And yeah, I've been really thrilled to work with all these fine musicians, and you know, you can't have a good band without a really good rhythm section, and I'm lucky enough to have a really good rhythm section. So that's Evelyn Vigil on guitar. Andres Olmos on piano. And the rest of them, I'm losing all of them. I'm so heartbroken, but also excited for their next chapters. On the drums right there, that's Ethan Fuller. He's one of those 2%ers that got into the popular music program at USC, so the other incredible drummer that you've been hearing all night is Brando Nicolas. And he's going to be joining the ranks of quite a few of our alum over at CSUN, which has an incredible... Also heading over to CSUN is one of our great bass players, Phil Mardirosian. So who knows, maybe we'll keep that quarter note lock going. We'll see. And then also heading up north, which is where I'm from, my old stomping grounds, Unju Chang is going to Berkeley. So to say I feel honored to work with all these fine musicians is an understatement, but that's what I'm going to leave it at. They're all incredible, and I look forward to hearing what they do in the future. So we're going to go ahead and continue on with another Christine Jensen tune. This one's called Sea Fever, and I do hope you enjoy. Okay, so we're about wrapping it up here. We got a couple more for you, but I do want to say a few thank yous before we go on, because it takes a lot of people and a lot of time and energy to put a show like this together, and it's not just these students practicing this material, but it's also like the people like Jairo and Henry back there running the sound. We're really grateful for Luis Lopez and all he does to run the sound support that's happening all over campus for all of our live events. So thanks to Luis. Yeah. I'd like to give a big thank you to Zach Graff, who also runs all of the, kind of everything behind the scenes when it comes to that. Is that you over there? I can't really see that. Sorry. Yeah, that's Zach Graff. He deals with all the scheduling, making sure the rooms are there, making sure the equipment is there, the promotional materials, like everything, like all the concerts that you heard outside if you were there for the duration of the semester. So yeah, thanks a lot, Zach. Appreciate it, man. I also want to give a couple shout outs to some colleagues. I know we have great faculty on campus here. The music department is stacked with talent, and I feel very lucky to be a member of that team. We are losing, like I'm saying, I'm losing some students next semester. We're losing a great colleague next semester. I believe he's here, Kyle Luck, after 19 years of service. We'll miss you, Kyle. Thank you. Thanks for everything. Don't be a stranger. Come back and see some shows. Also, I see my colleague Dan Cole over there. And forgive me if I can't see others in the audience. I actually probably need to go to the eye doctor. And is Zach Matthews here? Yeah, Zach. So Zach keeps everything going in the music department because he's the chair of the department, and he does a fantastic job keeping us all on task and getting things executed by the deadline. And so Zach, we're very appreciative of everything you bring to the table. Thank you. And of course, it all starts kind of at the top in the music department. Dr. Solomon Cross, who is very supportive of the program. I don't know if he's here or not. Here he is, Dr. Solomon Cross. We're very lucky to have a team that is invested in making sure that the students have access to the best of everything, and so thank you for everything. Yeah, that's great. Also, Guadalupe in the office, is also behind the scenes, so please give it up for Guadalupe. And I also want to say thank you to all of you, because you're keeping the music alive by supporting live music and coming out and listening to the hard work that these students have been doing all semester. So thank you for being here. We really mean a lot.
Yeah.
I do also want to give a shout out to Brad and Susan Ratliff, if they're here. I don't know if they were here last night. Yeah. They run the Ovo Foundation and are big supporters of the program, big fans of music, and also give a scholarship that the students kind of compete for over the course of every spring semester. I think Brando, you were a recipient of one of those scholarships, actually. In any case, Brad and Susan, thank you for everything. I really appreciate it. I think we'll leave it at that. But yeah, a lot of appreciation going around on campus. So yeah. So without further ado, we're going to wrap up this concert. We're going to feature once again. We've been hearing from him all night, but this is going to feature Bruce Flores on trumpet. This is great. is another really fun John Diversa chart called Missing Platelets.
Let's also give a big round of applause for Dr. Brian Carmody, please.
Thanks again for coming out and supporting live music. This is your Lansing Jazz Big Band, Spring 2025. Hope you have a great rest of your semester. Hope to see you at future events.